The letter came on a Tuesday. Plain white envelope, my name scrawled in my youngest son's handwriting. Inside was nothing but a single key and a note that read, "Dad, the farm is gone." 50 years of sweat and soil under my fingernails, $7 million of prime Iowa farmland that had been in our family for 3 generations, divided between my 2 sons while I was recovering from heart surgery. And now, nothing. Not even a handful of the soil I'd worked since I was 18. I'm Robert Callahan, and I never thought I'd be sitting in this 1-bedroom apartment in Des Moines at 68, watching corn prices on a tiny TV instead of from my farmhouse porch. 3 months ago, I owned one of the most productive grain operations in Story County. Today, I have this key to an empty storage shed where they've left what they call my share. This is the story of how my sons took everything I built, how I discovered what they'd been hiding from me for years, and why that empty shed turned out to be the most valuable inheritance of all. The Callahan farm wasn't just land, it was our identity. My father bought the first 200 acres in 1945 after returning from the Pacific, and I expanded it to over 1,500 acres of prime corn and soybean fields. The farmhouse stood tall on a gentle rise, white clapboard with a wraparound porch where I'd sit with my coffee every morning at 5 a.m., watching the sun paint the fields gold. I raised my sons there, Michael and Thomas, after their mother, Louise, passed from cancer when they were just 12 and 9. Michael, my oldest, was always the serious one. Even as a boy, he'd follow me with a tiny notebook, recording crop yields and equipment maintenance schedules. By high school, he was already talking about agricultural economics and sustainability practices. Thomas was different, restless, creative, more interested in the mechanical aspects of farming. He could take apart and reassemble a combine harvester by 16, but struggled with the patience farming requires. "Farming isn't just a job, boys," I'd tell them during our evening meals of Louise's recipes I'd tried my best to recreate. "It's a covenant with the land. We're just temporary caretakers of something permanent." I remember when Michael was 17, we attended the state fair competition where he'd entered our corn. The Petersons, our neighbors with the 800-acre operation, had won 5 years running. Their son James made sure everyone knew it. "The Callahan corn looks a bit pale this year, doesn't it?" James announced loudly as the judges made their rounds. "Probably that subpar irrigation system old man Callahan refuses to upgrade." Michael's face flushed red as laughter rippled through the crowd. I wanted to step in, but some lessons need learning firsthand. When we placed third, behind both the Petersons and the Andersons, Michael didn't speak the entire drive home. 3 days later, I found him in the field office at 2 a.m., surrounded by agricultural journals, soil sample reports, and weather pattern analyses. "We're switching to a new hybrid seed next season," he informed me, eyes bloodshot but determined. "And I've calculated exactly how to adjust our nitrogen application schedule." The following year, we took first place. James Peterson wouldn't look us in the eye, but Michael didn't gloat. He just nodded solemnly when they called our name, as if he'd merely corrected a mathematical error. Thomas had his humiliations too, but they were different. At his high school graduation party, I overheard Mrs. Whitaker, our church organist, asking him what college he'd chosen. "Oh, Thomas isn't college material," I'd said with a laugh, clapping him on the shoulder. "He's got mechanical genius in those hands, going to take over our equipment maintenance, save us a fortune." I meant it as a compliment, but the look that flashed across his face haunts me still. That night, I found his acceptance letter to Iowa State's engineering program crumpled in the trash. "You never asked what I wanted, Dad," he said when I confronted him. "Never once." He went to community college instead, studying agriculture because that's what Callahans do. He came back to the farm, but something had changed between us. My grand gesture was meant to heal all this. As I approached retirement age, I drafted plans to convert part of our operation to organic. build a state-of-the-art processing facility, and establish the Callahan Family Foundation with Louisa's name on it. It would secure the farm's future and give both my sons their rightful places. Michael handling the business side, Thomas the innovative engineering aspects. I kept it secret, working with lawyers and architects for 2 years, wanting it to be perfect before I presented it to them. What I didn't know was that my sons had secrets too. While I was planning our legacy, they were planning something else entirely. The heart attack hit me the morning I was going to reveal my plans, April 15th, tax day. The irony doesn't escape me. As I lay in the hospital, tubes snaking from my arms, I had no idea that everything was already slipping away. Recovery was slow. After 3 weeks in the hospital and another 2 in rehabilitation, I was finally cleared to return home. But home had changed. There was a new truck in the driveway. The kitchen had been remodeled with sleek stainless steel appliances that Louise would have hated. My office door was locked. "Just taking some of the burden off you, Dad," Michael explained, handing me pills with a glass of water. "Doctor says you need to take it easy." But it was more than that. Farm meetings happened without me. Phone calls ended abruptly when I entered a room. Thomas spent more time in the machine shop, avoiding the house entirely. "We've got this handled," became their refrain whenever I asked questions. The annual Harvest Festival was approaching, a tradition in our community where farm families gathered at the county fairgrounds for food, music, and catching up before the intense work of harvest began. It had always been my favorite event of the year. Louise used to bake her blue ribbon apple pies, and I'd organized the tractor pull competition. This year, Michael informed me we would host a special announcement at our farm instead. "We have invited everyone over here," he said. "It's time to look toward the future of Callahan Farms." I should have been suspicious, but part of me hoped they'd somehow discovered my plans for the foundation and processing facility. Maybe they were finally ready to embrace the vision I'd been crafting in secret. The day before the gathering, I overheard them arguing in the barn. "He won't accept it, Michael," Thomas's voice echoed. "You know how stubborn he is." "He doesn't have a choice anymore. The papers are signed." "We could at least give him the North Field. It's only 40 acres. "And what? Let him run it into the ground with his outdated methods? The bank won't approve the loans if the operation is fragmented. It's all or nothing." My hands shook as I retreated, unseen. That night, I broke into my own office using a credit card on the flimsy lock. The desk had been cleared, but they'd forgotten about the false bottom in the center drawer, where I kept my most important documents and the flash drive containing all my plans for the foundation. The morning of the gathering dawned clear and cool, perfect September weather. By noon, trucks and cars lined our long gravel driveway. The Petersons were there, James now running their operation since his father's retirement, the Andersons, the Whitakers, Pastor Collins, even Mayor Simmons. Nearly 60 people milled around our yard, enjoying the catered barbecue and locally brewed beer. I dressed carefully in my best flannel shirt and the bolo tie Louise had given me on our 25th anniversary. When I emerged from my bedroom, Thomas was waiting in the hallway. "Dad, I wanted to talk to you before." Michael appeared behind him. "Everyone's waiting, Thomas. Let's stick to the schedule." A makeshift podium had been set up near the old oak tree where we'd hung the kids' tire swing decades ago. Michael stepped up to it, tapping the microphone. The crowd quieted. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today," he began. "As many of you know, my father Robert suffered a health scare this spring. It's made us all reflect on the future of this land that the Callahans have stewarded for generations." The crowd murmured sympathetically. I stood off to the side, my heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with my recent surgery. "Today, we are proud to announce that Callahan Farms is entering a new era," Michael continued.
Through a partnership with Heartland Agricultural Investments, we'll be implementing cutting-edge technologies and sustainable practices that will increase productivity by an estimated 30%. Applause broke out. I noticed James Peterson nodding approvingly. As part of this transition, Michael went on, Thomas and I will be assuming full operational control, allowing our father to enjoy a well-deserved retirement. He gestured toward me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dad, would you like to say a few words? The crowd turned to me expectantly. As I moved toward the podium, Thomas whispered urgently, Dad, we need to talk privately first. But it was too late.
I was already standing before our friends and neighbors, looking out at the curious faces of people who'd known me all my life. Through the crowd, I spotted Sheriff Wilson, who'd arrived late. He gave me a grim nod, and I knew immediately he'd come to deliver news, not to socialize. "Thank you all for coming," I said into the microphone, my voice steadier than I felt. "It seems there are big changes coming to Callahan Farms." I paused, looking directly at my sons. "Though some changes happen behind closed doors, don't they, boys?" The tension in the air thickened. Michael stepped forward, reaching for the microphone. "Dad's still recovering, folks. Maybe we should—" Sheriff Wilson moved through the crowd toward us. "Robert," he called out, "I need a word. It's about the fire at your storage facility in Ames." And that's when I realized they hadn't just taken my farm. They'd erased my legacy. The crowd fell silent. My storage facility in Ames, where I'd kept all the architectural models, equipment prototypes, and legal documents for the processing plant and foundation, had burned down? I'd never told anyone about that rental space, not even my sons. "What fire?" I asked, my voice amplified by the microphone still in my hand. Sheriff Wilson looked confused, glancing between me and my sons. "The facility on Industrial Parkway. Happened last night around 2 a.m. Thought you'd have heard by now. Your son Michael called it in." All eyes turned to Michael, whose face had gone pale. Thomas stood frozen beside him, eyes wide with shock, not at the news of the fire, but at the revelation that I knew about the storage unit. "How interesting," I said, gripping the podium to stay upright. "Since that facility was registered under a shell company. No one knew about it except me, and apparently my sons." Michael stepped forward, professional smile still plastered on his face. "Dad, this isn't the time or place." "No, I think this is exactly the right time and place." My voice grew stronger. "In front of all these people who've known us for decades. People who watched you boys grow up. People who think they're here to celebrate when they're actually witnessing a theft." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. James Peterson was whispering to his wife. Mayor Simmons looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Michael, Thomas, tell everyone about Heartland Agricultural Investments." I turned to the crowd. "It's a shell corporation they created 6 months ago. They're not partnering with it, they are it." "Dad, you're confused," Michael said, reaching for the microphone. "The doctor said these episodes might happen." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. "This contains my plans for the future of Callahan Farms. A state-of-the-art organic processing facility. The Louise Callahan Foundation to help struggling farm families. Scholarships for rural students. All the architectural plans, legal documents, everything, backed up right here." I held it up for everyone to see. "The originals were in that storage unit that mysteriously caught fire last night." Thomas finally spoke. "Dad, we didn't know." "No? Then why were you arguing about whether to leave me the Northfield yesterday? Why have you locked me out of my own office? Why did you wait until I was lying in a hospital bed to transfer ownership of my farm to your corporation?" Michael's composure cracked. "Because you would have run this place into the ground with your outdated, sentimental farming methods. We're drowning in debt because you refuse to evolve." The crowd gasped. Mrs. Whitaker put her hand over her mouth. "Drowning in debt?" I laughed bitterly. "Show them the books, Michael.
Show them how I paid off the last mortgage 5 years ago. Show them the equipment leasing company that generates more revenue than the crops themselves. Show them the mineral rights contracts. Michael's face contorted with rage. You think you know everything? You don't know what it takes to compete today. Your precious covenant with the land doesn't matter when foreign conglomerates are buying up every farm in the county. We're saving this operation. By stealing it from me? By destroying my plans for our future? I turned back to our neighbors. 2 months ago, while I was in cardiac rehab, my sons had me declared temporarily incompetent. They used healthcare proxy documents to gain power of attorney. Then they transferred my farm, valued at over $7 million, to their corporation for the sum of $1. Pastor Collins stepped forward. Michael, Thomas, is this true? Thomas couldn't meet his eyes. Michael's jaw clenched. And yesterday, I continued, they sent me a letter with a key to an empty storage shed.
That's my inheritance after 50 years of work. An empty shed. I stepped away from the podium, suddenly exhausted. The crowd parted as I walked through them, heading toward the house. "Dad, wait!" Thomas called, running after me. "We can explain." I turned back one last time, addressing everyone gathered there. The Callahan farm isn't just land. It was supposed to be a legacy of honor. Clearly, I failed to pass that part on. As I walked into the house, I heard the rumble of vehicles starting, people making hasty departures. Michael was shouting something about misunderstandings and legal complexities. Thomas stood alone under the oak tree, head bowed. I packed a single suitcase and walked out the back door to where Sheriff Wilson waited. "Need a ride into town, Robert?" he asked quietly. "Just one stop first," I replied. "I need to see what's in that empty shed they left me." Sheriff Wilson drove me to the far corner of the property, where a small metal storage shed stood, the one we'd used for overflow equipment parts and seasonal items. It looked abandoned, with tall grass growing around its base. "Want me to wait?" he asked as I got out of his cruiser. "No need, Jim. I'll call when I'm ready." The key turned easily in the padlock. Inside, the shed was nearly empty, just as I'd expected. A folding chair sat in the center, with a small wooden box on it. My heart sank. 50 years of work, and this was what remained of my legacy. I opened the box, expecting perhaps some family photos or trinkets they deemed sentimental but worthless. Instead, I found a stack of yellowed papers, my father's original deed to the farm, along with a handwritten journal I'd never seen before. The first entry was dated June 12, 1945. "Purchase the Willoughby place today. The seller doesn't know about the limestone deposits in the North Ravine. Geological survey confirms it's extensive. If farming fails, this will be our backup plan. Telling no one, not even Margaret. Some secrets need keeping until the right time." I sat heavily on the folding chair. Limestone deposits. I flipped through the journal, reading my father's meticulous notes about core samples, potential mining operations, and estimates of value, all from the 1940s. The final entry, dated just before his death in 1981, read, "Robert has made the farm more successful than I ever dreamed. No need to burden him with the limestone knowledge. Let this secret die with me, unless disaster strikes. The North Ravine is his insurance policy." I sat heavily on the folding chair. Limestone deposits. I flipped through the journal, reading my father's meticulous notes about core samples, potential mining operations, and estimates of value, all from the 1940s. The final entry, dated just before his death in 1981, read, "Robert has made the farm more successful than I ever dreamed. No need to burden him with the limestone knowledge. Let this secret die with me unless disaster strikes. The North Ravine is his insurance policy." I called Evelyn Mercer, my father's attorney, who was now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack. She confirmed it.
Dad had filed a separate mineral rights deed that had never been transferred or disclosed, leaving the limestone rights specifically to Robert Callahan personally, and not to any business entity bearing the Callahan name. Those rights had never been part of the farm transfer to my son's corporation. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had kept a secret to protect me. I had kept my plans for the processing facility to surprise my sons. And they had kept their corporate takeover secret to deceive me. 3 generations of Callahan men, all thinking secrets would save them. I rented a small apartment in Des Moines and contacted Carson Hayes, a college friend who now ran an environmental engineering firm. Within 2 weeks, we had confirmation. The limestone deposit was high quality and extensive, worth potentially twice what the farm itself was valued at. Mining it would destroy the agricultural value of about 60 acres, but leave the rest intact. You could sell these rights for millions without turning a spade of dirt, Carson explained, or develop it yourself for even more. Meanwhile, the fallout from the Harvest Festival revelation was swift. James Peterson, of all people, called me first. "That's not how we do things around here, Robert," he said gruffly. "Your boys crossed a line. How can I help?" Pastor Collins organized a community meeting where several neighbors offered me places to stay, work if I wanted it, and support in whatever came next. Mayor Simmons mentioned that the town had been looking to establish an agricultural education center and would be interested in partnering if I still wanted to pursue something like my foundation idea. 3 weeks after I'd walked away from the farm, Thomas showed up at my apartment door, looking haggard. "Dad," he began, voice cracking, "I'm so sorry. I tried to stop it, but not hard enough." We talked for hours. He explained how Michael had convinced him that I was running the farm into debt, that my refusal to adapt would cost them their inheritance.
He believed Michael partly because, as he admitted, I wanted it to be true. I wanted to justify taking control. The reality was that while the farm wasn't in debt, Michael had taken out personal loans against his future inheritance to invest in agricultural technology startups that had failed. He was underwater and desperate. "He found your storage unit receipt in your desk after your heart attack," Thomas explained. "When he realized you had some big plan, he panicked, thought you were going to sell everything out from under us." "And the fire?" I asked. Thomas looked away. "Michael hired someone. I didn't know until after." 2 days later, I had my lawyer deliver papers to both my sons. Not lawsuit filings as they feared, but a proposal. I would establish Callahan Agricultural Trust with the limestone rights. The trust would lease mineral extraction rights to a sustainably operated quarry on the 60 affected acres. Profits would fund 3 things: the original foundation I had planned, college scholarships for rural students, and a new processing facility to be built on the other side of the property. Michael initially refused to meet, but eventually showed up at my apartment with his lawyer. He looked terrible, unshaven, red-eyed. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "Why not just take everything back? You could destroy us with what we did." "Because you're my sons," I said simply, "and because this farm isn't just about us, it's about the community, the land, the future." The terms were straightforward. They would retain ownership of the farming operation, but would lease it from the trust at fair market value. They would serve on the foundation board alongside community members, ensuring transparency. The processing facility would be built as I'd originally planned, creating local jobs and increasing the value of everyone's crops, not just ours. "And one more thing," I added. "That empty shed? It stays exactly as it is, as a reminder of what happens when we choose greed over family." Thomas agreed immediately. Michael took longer. His pride wounded more than his finances. But when the first core samples from the limestone deposit were valued, economic reality won out. The trust was established by Christmas. I never moved back to the farmhouse. Instead, I used some of the initial limestone rights money to buy a small cottage at the edge of town, close enough to oversee the trust operations, but far enough to give my sons space to run the farm their way.
The unexpected twist came 6 months later when Thomas requested a meeting at the empty shed. When I arrived, he was unloading equipment from his truck: a 3D printer, computer monitors, drafting tables. "I found your original plans for the processing facility," he said. "The engineering is brilliant, but I think I can improve it." He grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. "Thought we could work on it together, if you're willing to teach an old stubborn Callahan some new tricks." "Only if you're willing to teach this old stubborn Callahan some new ones too," I replied. We converted that empty shed into a design studio, where we refined the processing facility plans. Michael joined reluctantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, as he realized his business acumen complemented our technical skills. The foundation broke ground on the Louise Callahan Memorial Processing Facility that fall. At the ceremony, I used the same shovel my father had used to turn the first earth on the original farm in 1945. The limestone quarry began limited operations the following spring, using new environmentally sensitive extraction methods that Thomas helped develop. The first scholarship recipients, 5 local kids who otherwise couldn't afford college, received their acceptance letters that same week. As for that key to the empty shed, I had it gold-plated and hung it in the foundation's office under a simple plaque that reads, "Sometimes what looks like an ending is just a door to something better." Looking back now, 3 years later, I can see how that empty shed wasn't really empty at all. It held my father's secret, which became my salvation. It held the space for reconciliation, which rebuilt my family. Most importantly, it held a truth I needed to learn: that legacies aren't measured in acres or dollars, but in the lives we touch and the values we pass on. The Callahan Processing Facility now serves over 40 family farms in 3 counties. The foundation has sent 17 kids to college. And last month, Thomas's daughter, my granddaughter Katie, announced she wants to study agricultural engineering. Michael's son is more interested in environmental law, which makes me smile.
The land will find its caretakers, generation after generation. If you're facing your own empty shed moment when everything seems lost, remember that sometimes our greatest gifts come disguised as our greatest losses. What matters isn't what was taken from you, but what you choose to build with what remains. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more tales of family, land, and redemption. And remember, in farming and in life, there's always another season coming.